We feel that the best way to raise awareness is by in doing this, sharing your stories. So raising awareness for people that don't know anything about NF, but also just visibility for people that have NF, and maybe they'll see their story in your story. Why don't you tell us your name, introduce yourself, and share with us your NF journey?
I'm Katie Francisco, and I have NF1. I didn't find out until I was 18. I tried, like, there was some weird stuff going on health-wise, obviously, but the doctors that I went to see couldn't figure it out. And they came up with wild conclusions that were not helpful. And they'd send me to specialists, and the specialist would say, that's not what that is. I don't know what it is, but that's not what it is. It took me a long time to finally figure it out. I'd always had pain, like growing up when I was little. Like if somebody just barely touched me gently, I would be like, ow. And everyone always said, oh, that's in your head. You're just being really like sensitive, or like you're making it up or something. And I was like, no, it feels like you're like hitting me, but you barely touch me. They were just like, oh, that's just, you're like exaggerating it somehow or something. And I'm like, no, I swear I'm not. Well, finally we figured out why.
Yeah.
So when I was 18, when I finally got diagnosed, in fact, weirdly, it was actually my childhood general practitioner that figured it out. She noticed that my pulse above my left hip and below my left hip, just like this far apart, was I had a different pulse, because obviously as it turns out, I think there's like a tumor in there that's blocking it. And so the blood flow is different in the different parts of my hip. She sent me then to some other kind of specialist, not an NF specialist, but somebody who specializes in weird stuff. And she's like, I think it's this, and I'm going to send you to this person to confirm it. And then I wound up going to the neurology clinic at the University of Kentucky. That's where I started getting my like NF care. So that was really weird, having like all of these symptoms and then it all finally making sense, and going from doctors having no idea what was going on with me to it being on like the intake form.
That had to be like such a good feeling.
Yeah, to finally be like, oh, hey, I'm actually like on the list.
Yeah.
But of course, anytime I do anything else now, even like with COVID now, like explaining to them, they're like, oh, what are your health conditions? And they're like, oh, I have neurofibromatosis. And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, it's okay. I already read all the forums. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But, talking to people who aren't in neurology or oncology or whatever, they don't know what you're talking about a lot of times. And it's like, and everybody either gives you the response of what in the world, or, oh yeah, of course. Like there's no in between, like it's not like neutral information. It's either, oh duh, or what in the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
In what ways has NF affected you like throughout your life?
This is like one of those things where once you find out certain information, everything starts to click and make sense. I didn't ever crawl as a baby. Not only do I have the most tumors in my legs, it's also really painful. And my left leg is where my bone is bowed, like I think is supposed to be common. And my muscle just in my left leg doesn't form. Like I can do double reps in exercise on my left side, and it still is like 10 times more slack than my right side. It's like a huge difference. And like I said, I cannot work out enough to overcompensate to make them match. It just doesn't work. Yeah, that bone is misshapen and all of that's weird. And I think because it hurt so much, I never learned to crawl. I went straight from like pulling myself around with my arms to walking. Yeah. And so I never was like super athletic as a kid because I didn't know it, but it was making me in pain all the time. And so I didn't like it. And I was always very like risk averse. Like I didn't like doing a lot of things that kids like to do that involved running around, because like getting banged up and stuff, it would hurt me. And maybe kids are used to like getting bruises and banging into stuff, but I just really didn't like it. And I also had a really difficult time with learning to ride the bike. But now that I know that like my muscle's not developed on one side, of course I'm not going to be able to balance on something because my muscles aren't balanced. Maybe it's something I could do now that I know and I could figure out a way to compensate, but with not knowing that information, of course I'm going to keep falling over. So yeah, that was definitely a challenge. Being in pain all the time is a challenge. Once I found out, the ones in my left leg was growing to the point where like when I would walk, it would hurt. And so that's the first and so far only one that I've had removed, because it was right in my calf muscle. And when I would like flex to like go upstairs, or like if there was an incline or something, in a driveway, it would hurt because just that flexing was like I was bumping up into it. And it really hurt in yoga because I was going to yoga for a while, and it, like when you have to like get on your knee, like on your knees and sit back, and like there's a whole like yoga thing where you're stretching out your calf muscles. That was excruciating. Like I couldn't even kind of do that.
Yeah.
So I had that one removed. And then there's one that one of the most painful ones I don't think I can have removed because it's in my hand and it's like kind of connected to the nerves that control these fingers. So I can't really do much with that unless it gets really big, and then I just have to. And it's the most painful. Like if I just set my hand down, like even sometimes if I set my hand on my computer, it's like I've grabbed a knife. If I open the door wrong, if I set my hand on the back of like a chair, it can be soft. It doesn't matter. It's still like, I feel like here's a knife and my hand just went, that's what it feels like. So, and then like I have one here too. So if I'm sitting like with my phone in my bed and like I have like my arm is resting and then I have something in my hand falls, or like my whole arm falls asleep in like 4 or 5 minutes. Wow. So it's just fun. It's like weird things that, and then you just live with them because you don't have a choice. And then you tell other people who don't have enough about it and they're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Why are you laughing? And it's like, because it is what it is. like I have one up here. It's the only one that's most people don't know until like I point it out, especially because I wear my hair on this side usually. But like I have a tumor here and then there's like a gap here. Like I don't know why there's a gap underneath where the tumor is, but there is. It's a hole. And then my ear. So like everything on this side is slid down a little bit. Yeah. And mostly like I actually wore earrings to like try and, you can't see it because of the background, but my ears are like,
oh yeah,
almost a half an inch to an inch. I can't remember what the measurement is, but they're like that.
I can tell now that you've pointed it out, but I didn't notice before.
So, and I know everybody's like, oh, well, everybody's a little bit uneven. I'm like, yeah, but I'm pretty sure like this entire half of my face is like pushed a little bit.
When people think of NF, like they all think of like the hardships and what you've lost or the workarounds, but do you feel that there's anything you've gained from having NF?
I can say what I've gained from like getting the diagnosis for sure. Cause I know a lot of people I've seen like in groups and stuff, a lot of people are really nervous about getting the diagnosis. And I'm like, well, I was panicked because I mean, like I thought I had like some kind of like really intense cancer or something, like based on some of the symptoms. And so to find out that it was NF, I mean, it's like a little bit scary, but my mind had made up so many different things that it could have been that I was like, well, this is manageable. Like I'm in pain. I have to do MRIs every couple of years. I don't know. And I kind of feel guilty too, since I have mostly invisible NF, and I'm in pain constantly. But on the other hand, like, I don't know. I feel guilty that I like, some people don't have pain, but it's visible and it's like, it's so different for everybody. But my dad, I guess, so my dad found out through me because he has it, but he didn't know because none of his have hurt him. He's got a ton all throughout his body, but they just aren't pressing up in a way that hurts. But he got diagnosed through me, and our oncologist is really interested in our study because it came from both of his sides of the family. Like he's got relatives on both sides of his family that have it, and they were misdiagnosed, but like it was based on the symptoms. It's that's what it is. That was kind of interesting, connecting all of those dots and kind of figuring that out and realizing how far in the family it went back on both sides of my dad's side of the family. For one, there aren't that many people who get diagnosed in adulthood. Most people are like, oh, my child got diagnosed at like 2 months old. And I'm like, wow. Like I managed to make it until college before I got an answer. And then my dad was like 50. That was kind of neat, like my diagnosis and me learning about it. And once you learn about it, then you can manage it. Or like in my case, like I knew what to do to have that surgery when I needed to have that thing removed, and bringing awareness to it too, through like I'm a fashion designer, and also like I kind of do like pinup modeling. And so in those, being able to use those platforms to talk about NF more and explain like what it is. And so that's cool.
So how did you get connected with NF Midwest? Because
I was in college when I even found out, I would check Facebook for any kind of relevant groups or information, since I was so new to it and I didn't know anything. And I think my doctors even said you should look up different groups and stuff to find out more.
What's been your favorite part about connecting with NF Midwest?
I've really enjoyed finding other people that had it, going from not even knowing it existed or what it was to like talking to other people who, even though it affects us all in different ways, still finding some of the similar experiences and like, oh yeah, like bumping into tumors is the worst, that kind of thing. Just finding other people who know what it's like, because it's weird. Like even like most of my friends have chronic illnesses of various kinds, weirdly, but they're different. So, we still can commiserate on like, oh, this or that, but being able to commiserate and like talk to people who understand like things you're going through is just really nice and helpful. And like you learn stuff too, which is nice.
Do you have any advice for someone that's being newly diagnosed, or a parent that just had their child newly diagnosed?
It's kind of great to go ahead and be diagnosed, because otherwise you wonder what's wrong with you. And I mean, I wish I'd been diagnosed earlier too, because I mean, I have some of the side effects from it, like some of like the ADHD kind of stuff that's probably connected. And I mean, there's so much stuff that if I had known, that's great. Like if you know, and that way you can watch for stuff. It's hard to say this because I know there are like legitimate complications that like make you have to go to the hospital all the time and stuff, but it doesn't have to be scary. But knowing what you're dealing with can make it less scary for sure, not more scary. Annoying, yes, but it happens, you really do get used to it. I used to think I had a really low pain tolerance, but it turns out I was just like already almost done. Like I was already just like at the top of my level.
Is there anything else you want to add? You gave us so much good information already. So
good.
And your story
Yeah.
is very unique. Everybody that I've talked to has such a different story. So
It is. It's so different. Like it really depends. Like even in somebody who has the exact same kind that I do, like version of it, our tumors are in different spots, which causes different problems. Like,
yep.
Like mine are in my like, well, they're everywhere, but I mean, just the exact place that it like lands. Like if it landed like a little bit over here, it would be different.
Yep.
Like a different experience. So it's so hard to give advice because it's like, well, you might have yours in a different spot. And so my workarounds and things that I've learned might not help. I mean, like I know working out like in a swimming pool, that can help no matter where your tumors are, because you don't have the weight and the pressure, and that is excellent. But it can be hard to access. So
right. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your story. Just know you have a whole team behind you. We're all fighting for all of you. Thanks again for your time. Have
thank you.
a beautiful day.
You too.
Thanks.